This video is designed to help with some direction, what we'll be doing as we start to seriously build the components of the paper. So as we can see, we may have some idea about where we are and where we want to go, but if part of the sign is missing, then it's going to be difficult for us to figure out where and how we're going to get through things. So let's take a look at segment 2 for the course, which is gathering content for the paper. This is, of course, English 128 in our module objectives. So in this particular second module, what we're going to do is we'll have a variety of different activities and outcomes, objectives, and learning objectives that we want to accomplish in this section. One of the first activities we're going to be doing here is taking a look at locating reliable sources. How can we find reliable sources that we can use so that we can, for the evidence or examples or support for the topic and the claim that we're making. We're also going to take a look at a review of different types of source types. So we have primary sources, and primary source doesn't mean this is the most important or the one that I'm using the most for. Primary refers to the source of the information. Did it come from the people who did the actual research? So a primary source would come primarily from those primary sources that did the actual research. Secondary source would be research that's done based on putting together a combination of pieces of research or other things that have been done by other people and providing some analysis and evaluation and application to that. And then the third type is basically just information. We would call those tertiary sources or ancillary sources, and basically that just presents the information, a news article, some kind of information website, something like that would be a tertiary one that provides that information, but it doesn't provide the actual original research information and data and going over that. So after we've gone over how to find these sources and how to differentiate between them, what we'll have is we'll have a little activity where we'll have links to 5 different sources, and then we will take a look and see, would we consider this to be a primary source or a secondary source or a tertiary source, just an information source. After that, then we'll take a look at the historical background that should be used in our paper and in our topic. Basically, what kind of historical trends or occurrences or things of that nature have led up to the point where our claim about the topic then becomes relevant or important. After we've done that, we'll take a look at an assortment of 5 different historical background samples, and we'll look at those and see how well do they lead us towards some point that we can anticipate being made, or is it just a random assortment of information that doesn't really seem to have any focus or direction to it. Once we've done that, then students will have the assignment to write a draft of their historical background for the topic and claim that they have chosen for their paper. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the source analysis. So students will then choose one of the primary sources that they found related to their topic, and then provide a summary of what is going on in that particular source. What were the researchers looking for? What kind of conclusions did they come to? As well as how important or relevant would this be for the actual paper that the student is doing and the research involved. Also, what kinds of questions or issues might be raised as a result of this research and the research content. And then finally, we'll take a look and study how we can do follow-up inquiries. So if we do find some questions or issues being raised or some things we don't understand about the actual research, then how can we follow up and clarify those things? So once we finish this particular module, at the end, then what are the outcomes? What will students be able to do? Well, first, students should be able to identify and differentiate among primary, secondary, and tertiary sources, to identify the nature of the source and also the reliability and credibility of that source. So what this means is that the students will be able to evaluate and let us know and indicate how reliable this source is based upon the conventions of the scientific method that we'll be studying. Third, the students should be able to identify and produce significant components of historical background content that would then lead to a particular research question and claim. And finally, number 4, students should be able to express concerns or questions that are related to sources and then be able to express those in formal correspondence as some kind of follow-up inquiry. So here's what we'll see when we open up the module. First of all, there's the overview of the objectives, activities, and outcomes segment, which you're watching right now. Then there's the reading assignment. So there are 2 files in the Canvas page. First of all, the types of sources. So there's a reading on that to study that with some links. There's also another on finding sources. What kind of scholarly sources can we find and how can we find those? And then what we have is we have the guidelines to evaluating the sources and the task discussion. So this will give a list of all 5 of the sources that we'll be looking at. Then students at this link then will post their evaluation of the first of the sources. Do they think that this is a primary source? Do they think that it's a secondary source? Do they think that it's just a tertiary information source? And then explain why they've come up with that evaluation. Of course, grammar is an issue and it's important. So make sure that everything is expressed in a clear way according to the conventions of academic writing. And then the students will post up their evaluation of the second source, their evaluation of the third source, their evaluation of the fourth source, and their evaluation of the fifth source. So each source evaluation will be posted in a separate discussion board. Then, after we finish with this 5th evaluation, then we're going to take a look at the file will unlock, and we'll take a look at what were the answers to these. How were these actually categorized? And then students need to read those explanations of all 5 of those evaluations, all 5 of those sources, and then provide a response comment to that. Then we're going to take a look at what is it that makes a good historical background statement, and then we'll take a look at an assortment of historical background samples and then rank them. Which one is the best one, which one is second best, and so forth. After we've done that, then there'll be a file will unlock with the answers to those, and students should review those answers and evaluations and then post a response. Then students will then submit their own background draft. After that, then we'll have the guidelines for the letter of inquiry, where students can then take one of their own sources, provide a analysis of that source, and then they will draft a letter. It's not necessary to send the letter, but they will draft a letter that they can send to the author of that article to clear up any questions or provide any kind of follow-up information. Once we finish this module, then we'll move on to segment 3, which is when finally we can start putting together the paper draft and start including the information that we found from our own research. Now, please remember that in this case, our focus and our interest is in the natural science topics, and we want to have claims that are testable, that are fact-based, that then anyone could be able to duplicate or come up with the same answer, applying the same kind of criteria to that, and then that should provide predictions that would be consistent. Now, the social sciences will also use the same thing. They'll come up with topics and they'll come up with claims, but their claims are more categorical and conceptual, and they're based upon the definitions of how would they define what is right or what is wrong, or what is consistent, what are the patterns that are involved. And of course, the humanities is more interested in value-based the right and the wrong, ethics, and things of that nature. And as we know, as has been mentioned previously, is that the applied sciences also are part of what we'll be discussing in our course. So the signs are there, but we need to make sure and clear about the direction of where we want to go. And by completing the activities in this particular module, we should have a clear direction and a clear purpose and be able to find the trails and the guidelines that will lead us to finding the right kind of information, reliable information that we can accept, and not information that's sometimes based upon partial information, partial research. Sometimes there's a bias or some kind of an agenda involved with that. So we need to provide a little bit of critical analysis to the sources that we find.